You're listening to the Tom Green Podcast. I hope everyone is being safe. I hope people are staying home and not getting infected or infecting others. Normally I do an intro, but I want to get this podcast on the air and into the world as quickly as possible because it contains some very valuable information, informative conversation with Dr. Drew, and hopefully it will give us all some hope. There's Dr. Drew. Hello, Dr. Drew.
Yeah, buddy.
Hey, thanks for calling. We're on the air, as they say.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
On the Webovision.
Well, I guess this is Webovision. I haven't been calling it Webovision lately because it's the podcast now. That's the word for it now. It's a podcast now. But
wow, never heard of such a thing.
Yes.
What is this podcast thing?
Remember we used to do podcasts before they were called podcasts? You'd come up to my house and we'd do Webovision because we just made up a name for it.
We didn't, you did, but I'll tell you what, you were the pioneer. People don't know that was what pushed the ball forward.
You were definitely part of it, though, because you were so gracious to come up and share your time, and you came and did the Webovision many times up here at the house back in starting around 2005. And
I actually, the reason I was so interested in what we were doing is I had one of those web companies in the late 90s. And as part of that whole organization, we did a weekly sort of television show. We didn't know what we were doing, but we would record an interview every week for an hour. It's like a full-scale television-style production, much like you were doing out of your house, except nobody could watch it because nobody had broadband.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We were just broadcasting to ourselves.
Yes, but nobody could see it because they didn't have the technology to stream it yet or download it. And both you and I were there we had a sense that this was the future. We just were ahead of it.
We knew it was going to work someday, so we just had to get ahead of it. But then, as they say, the pioneers leave with the arrows in their back. Okay.
That's funny.
So, Dr. Drew, I was on your show yesterday, and thanks for having me on one of your many shows. How many shows are you doing now?
Well, I do a streaming show most days called The Dose, and I do a talk show, interactive streaming on Sundays called Ask Drew, and then I do Adam and Drew, I do a Drew podcast, I do After Dark podcast.
Wow, that's a lot of shows. I lost count of how many shows that was.
I guess that's five. Five.
Well, this is a very important time for people to be able to find some sort of hope and also information. And having you on the air and so accessible is obviously a great service in times like this. How are you dealing with this right now on your show and just personally with this unprecedented crisis that's going on with the coronavirus?
I mean, my consistent position has been to try to keep people looking at the positive side of this, because if you just look at the doomsday scenarios, you'll jump off a building. And the reality is the doomsday epidemiology and the doomsday predictions aren't going to happen because we are taking massive action. In fact, perhaps excessive action, but that's what we've decided to do collectively, and so we're all doing it. We've decided we're going to all get together, we're going to put our economy in a coma, and we're going to inconvenience everything and everybody, from school children to graduate students to anyone who has a job. And we're going to collectively take care of this thing. So we're going to have an impact. I just saw Anthony Fauci say exactly that. But his job is to protect us from the worst case scenario. So what I tell everybody consistently is just look at what he says. Let him be your North Star. If you're not clear what he said, go to the CDC website and just follow those directions. If we go beyond those, which many states are electing to do, okay, I'm part of that state. My governor has decided to do something, and I'm going to follow dutifully, even though I think it might be a little excessive, but so be it. We'll get this thing done quicker that way.
Are your callers that you're getting on the show and your social media followers, are they panicking right now?
Oh, my God. I spent all my day talking people off the ledge. The impact on people emotionally, it's almost like, I was talking to Bert Kreischer about this because he and I both have anxiety disorders, and I did his podcast. And I was saying that I feel it in the air. I feel the anxiety and the panic like it's literally some sort of electrical transmission at all times. I just feel it. And I suspect it's just, of course, my own anxiety and awareness of how people are so upset. But we don't need to be. That's the part that's disturbing me. If you turn on the TV and look at the press, you immediately will cave into panic. And that, I find that reprehensible, that the media is doing that to humans. It's hurting people. We should be talking about the possibility there's some new treatments. How's the vaccine going? How well are we doing? Where are we on the curve? Look at how well we're doing in keeping this thing suppressed. Yes, New York City is going to have some problems right now. Yes, they are. It's a highly concentrated environment where lots of people live, so we expected this. That's where things are going to hit the fan. Maybe some other cities going to get a little tough too. We're going to get this. We're flexing. Here's what we're doing. We got the Navy ship off the shore. We got a lot of stuff ready to go, everybody. As opposed to, oh my God, it's the end of the world. We don't know what we're doing. And that is to me, that's damaging. And I don't mind, if I keep thinking about an image, a vignette I saw in the 1970s. It was a Soviet journalist being interviewed like in a 60 Minutes style magazine show, and our journalist was just hammering this guy. And finally, he looked at our journalist and he said, "I don't know why you're so tough on us. Our journalism, our media is a political instrument. In your country, it's a commercial instrument. Believe me, it will have its own distortions." And here we are, everybody. They're just trying to scare you to capture your eyes. Which is fine, but don't tell me about journalistic integrity then. Then stop it. Just go ahead and be a commercial enterprise, and then I won't criticize you, but don't pretend you have integrity.
So that's a strong accusation, though. You're essentially saying the entire media or most of the mainstream media is inflaming this to make money?
I don't think it's that self-conscious. I think they're doing it, having been in those rooms many, many years, they think about ratings a lot, and if they see their ratings going up, it's almost self-reinforcing, right? It's not like, oh, we're going to make more money. It's like, oh, we got good ratings. We must be doing the right thing, as opposed to standing back and thinking, is this what we want to do to people? Is this the impact we wish to have? That's integrity. Are we hurting something? And this whole and by the way, is it Chris Cuomo that does the morning show on CNN?
Yeah, he's on every day. I'm not sure if it's the morning or in the evening, but I think it's
both.
The evening.
He's both, I think. He's both, and he has specifically done that. And I just hats off to him. He has specifically stood back and said, you know what? I think I'm starting to go down a bad path. We're going to look at the positive outlet, and I am just like, let him be your North Star journalist. There's the guy that you should be watching as you model your behavior and report on my North Star, which is Anthony Fauci. It's not that hard. It's not that hard because it is damaging. We have to really think about this. And that's what I've been yelling about for a month and a half. I could see where this was going. I could see the panic. I could see the extreme distress that they were going for and causing. That's why I kept saying, shut up, please shut up. But no, it was not going to happen. So.
Is it not possible, though, just to look at it from their perspective, that maybe they feel like they're being responsible to talk about the extreme danger that we're facing here, so that people are a little bit afraid and they do quarantine and they do go inside, as opposed to say, oh, it's just the flu, don't worry about it, I'm not going to go inside, and then this thing does grow and it becomes a huge thing. So is there not sort of some sort of logic to the way the media is handling this?
There is, and you and I talked about this on my streaming show yesterday, Tom, and it's a good point, and we do need it. We need people to be taking it very seriously. They do need to report on these extreme scenarios. People need to be aware of the potential, but to see it on the front page of the paper, or the New York Times particularly, every day, in the face of us doing really good work and getting things, back under control, that's what I'm taking issue with. And I just you don't have to pump it out there, or at least at the end of the drama, you say, have you gotten your flu shot? Are you hurt? Let's talk to a doctor about hydroxychloroquine and the potential for beneficial effect there. And just also give at least a countervailing point of view, and then calm down the extreme rhetoric, which is universal, which is all I see, is just the extreme rhetoric.
Do you think there's a feeling amongst shows and hosts and members of the media and journalists, I guess is the word I'm looking for, journalists. You think there's a feeling that if they don't treat this as seriously as it could possibly be, if they do try to sort of instill a sense of calm, and then this thing does turn out to be, a doomsday scenario, that they would sort of have a liability in the flip on the back end for not having raised the alarm big enough?
I think that they need to talk to more physicians, because physicians are used to thinking in terms of risk reward, and the risk reward is not about liability. The risk reward is by doing by doing anything, what harm am I doing? What harm do I do when I take any intervention, including, hey, come into my office? We harm people in extraordinarily common ways, and we are acutely aware of that balance of not doing harm. And that's what that sensibility that is so deep in my soul from having practiced medicine for 40 years is what I am seeing the press fly in the face of. They do not, it's clear to me, do not think, could I be doing harm? And forget liability if I don't really pump this thing. What harm am I doing? Can I get that balance right? And clearly people can change direction. Como did it. God bless him.
And what harm are they doing? Of course, the entire economy is shut down. That seems like harm. But we do need to shut down the restaurants. We do need to go home and sit in our homes. That is correct.
We think so.
Right?
We think that's right. We think that's correct. And again, to the extent of the CDC, we have states going to extreme measures above the CDC recommendations, and that's fine. It will help solve this thing quicker. Why aren't we presenting it that way as opposed to, oh my God, it's coming to get you, and that's why you have to stay home? It's like there's two ways to present it, which is we've decided in this state, and California is very aggressive, that we're going to get this thing more quickly, and we're going to really make sure that the governor doesn't ever have to actualize his plan for the most extraordinary outcomes. Instead, what they report on is, oh my God, Gavin Newsom who is our governor, is planning 60 million Californians to get this. And that was him making a case to the president for resources. That's his job. Think and prepare for the worst case scenario. That's the worst case scenario. And even Newsom said, we're not going to get there. Good. That's what he should be saying. He did a good job. But it was reported over and over again as he predicts 60 million Californians are going to get this.
What is the coronavirus? What is COVID-19, biologically speaking? Like, why is this so much more dangerous and causing so much more concern than the bird flu or the swine flu?
Well, that's the risk-reward analysis that people should be doing, and I'm sure guys like Fauci are doing. So COVID-19 is actually the illness caused by SARS coronavirus 2. So COVID-19 is not the virus, it's the illness.
Okay.
It's like saying pneumonia. So COVID-19 is the illness caused by SARS coronavirus 2.
Okay, I didn't know that.
It is more infectious, we think, than the flu. It appears to be. I think that's a good bet. It is more fatal than the flu in risk populations. So for the average person, it's actually less risky for the average person under the age of, say, 65. It's less risky by a large margin than the swine flu. The swine flu killed 40 to 60-year-olds routinely. It infected 1 billion people and killed 500,000. I got the swine flu. It was horrible. It was terrible. But that was our last pandemic, and it killed lots of people. And you don't remember it. No one knows it even happened.
Yeah.
So that's what I want people to just calm down and go, look, hey, the last one, we weren't even aware of it. If maybe I know somebody that got it. I got it. And it killed young people. And this one's killing older people primarily, and it's more infectious, and it's a higher fatality rate, particularly in the risk populations. In Italy, it's like 8.5%. It's really, and they have a lot of older people, and their healthcare system is overwhelmed. I don't know that we'll get to anything like that here. But yeah, it's a more serious thing. It needs to be taken more seriously. But what I'm always questioning is, and again, I will not question what the CDC is doing. I'm just sort of, as a thought experiment, as a clinician doing a risk-reward analysis, what I always think to myself is, okay, we have 24 million cases of the flu, 280,000 hospitalizations of the flu, 90% of the people tested for coronavirus have something like the flu. They don't have coronavirus. Only 10% tested with characteristic symptoms have the coronavirus. Flu killed 18,000 people. H1N1 killed 500,000 and infected 1 billion, and it primarily killed young people. What should our response be to this one? That's the risk reward. I'm just always like trying to put in context, and also if people do that, it calms them down. They can say, oh, that's right. I wasn't even aware there was a flu going on, and it killed already way more people than this thing did. And the H1N1, I wasn't aware that was a pandemic, and we made it through that one. We'll get through this one. That's the kind of thinking I want people to have.
Yeah, my understanding. So just to talk a little bit more about the biology of it, because I find it interesting, and I think maybe people might want to understand it. So, but my understanding of it is, from what I've read, right, is that this, from what I've read this week, right, I've become like an expert in this thing this week, because I'm panicking here in my house, and I don't
want you to panic. Don't panic.
Well, I'm kind of being. I'm not actually panicking, but I am locked in my house, and I have a lot of time on my hands. Let's put it that way.
Which is, Tom, that's never a series of ingredients I'd like you to be subjected to.
Yeah, you take that, and then you combine that with a cell phone hooked up to the internet, and you got a problem. But
wow.
But my understanding from it is, and I'd love to try to explain this to our listeners in a more easy to understand way. But there's viruses that a normal flu virus is a human virus. It is human transferred from human to human, and we have built up an acquired immunity to that over the years. And also, there's flu shots that give us an immunity to that, and so we aren't as susceptible to it. But this coronavirus is an animal to animal virus that spreads between animals, and they track it for years. And there was this virus that was going around amongst animals, and they rarely jump to humans, but this one did in a wet market in China, a meat market essentially, selling meat, jumped from an animal, possibly a bat, possibly a pangolin, they don't know, jumped from an animal to a human. And then once it gets in the human, the reason it's so dangerous is because the human, because it's an animal virus, it has a different, I think it's RNA or DNA, the different scientific biological encoding within the virus is something that the human immune system cannot read, and then it is not able to fight off the virus, and that's why it's so dangerous.
Let me refine some of that.
Is that correct?
It's not that it can't read it. It's not that it can't read it. It does read it and reacts to it and fights it off, and that's how you get over it. It's never seen it before, so the virus has a chance to get in and really take over before your immune system has a chance to. It's almost like an invading army that gets there before you arm up.
Like a Trojan horse.
Well, yeah, kind of. In fact, it's a Trojan horse explicitly because that's what viruses do. Let me talk about that in a second. But as far as the zoonotic, we call it, the zoonosis, the fact that it's from animals, pandemics are typically from animals. The swine flu, the reason we call it the swine flu, the H1N1, it came from animals. Yeah. And pandemic really just means new virus, widespread. Yeah. It doesn't mean deadly. It doesn't mean anything. It just means new virus, widespread. So when people use the word pandemic to scare you, again, I keep saying don't let them scare you with that. It's just a technical word that means widespread, and it's very widespread in this case. And this is a serious virus with a higher fatality rate than influenza. Now, let's dial it all the way back and talk about what viruses are. How about that? So people debate whether viruses are even alive. They are essentially nucleic acids wrapped in a protein shell that replicate by taking over your own DNA system and producing particles of itself and then pushing them back out into the system so they can infect more cells and take over more cells.
Wow.
So that's a virus.
Why are they doing that? We'll talk about that after. Why are they doing that? But we'll talk about that after. Continue.
Well, that's how they survive. That's their niche.
Okay.
That's their ecology.
Right.
And they, why does nature create non-living beings that or somethings that, take over, viruses have been important in our evolution. Viruses have been important in, they have all kinds of other weird effects with life, but they coexist with us and they cannibalize us. And they change their way of getting on, is by changing their structure so they can infect more beings.
Is that what they call mutating, when it mutates?
Yeah, they mutate or they drift, and the flu drifts a lot, and that's why we have to have a new vaccine every year. And that's why we don't get it right every year, because it's very hard to predict what that drift is. Coronaviruses are kind of weird. Coronaviruses, they attack the respiratory system. That's how they get into the body. Now, it looks like they're binding at a receptor in the lung that, interestingly, is associated with how our blood pressure is regulated. And certain blood pressure medicine actually cause an overexpression of those receptors on the surface of the lung. And there was for a while concern that those people may be at added risk of getting the infection. Now it looks like it also blocks the reuptake of the virus, so people on those medicines might, again, this is early preliminary speculation, not saying it is so, might help protect against the infection. So you see how the science goes back and forth a little bit. And as it infects the lung, it actually affects the lung tissue itself, not just the airways, but actually the air sacs. It caused them to become severely inflamed and to leak and fill with fluid and blood. And air sacs filled with fluid and blood, it's the exact same syndrome, interestingly, as you remember the vaping thing a few months ago?
Yeah.
When that's the same kind of phenomenon it's interesting. Nobody's made that correlation.
Yeah.
I thought of it this minute.
Uh-huh.
It's the same kind of thing that happens to the lungs with the virus. It's called the adult respiratory distress syndrome, which is essentially the air sacs filling with fluid and inflammatory material, and they can no longer exchange oxygen.
Hey, do you think it's possible, just because you said no one's made that correlation, do you think it's possible that was the coronavirus and it wasn't vaping at all? How do they attribute it to vaping?
It's a great thought. It's a great thought. Maybe some of the cases were, which is interesting. But no, that was clearly a toxic reaction to an oil. But again, you can either get the inflammation from a toxic reaction or from a virus. But I'm getting all these articles now. Oh my God, they have ARDS. They have adult respiratory distress syndrome. I'm like, I have been dealing with ARDS my entire career. This is not a new thing. This is typically why people end up in an ICU, is they get pneumonias that develop into ARDS. And ARDS is associated with shock. It's associated with other overwhelming infections. It's associated with big surgeries. It's associated with all kinds of things. So doctors are very familiar with adult respiratory distress syndrome. It's a common intensivist issue. So we're quite prepared to handle that. The problem is that it develops quickly and uncharacteristically so. Usually ARDS is something that comes late in the course of an illness. This comes on fast over about 3 or 4 days. The other interesting thing is typically viral pneumonias cause problems by causing secondary bacterial infections. That doesn't seem to be happening. But this ARDS is intense and persistent. So you've got to get people through that and able to oxygenate until they get on the other side and heal their lungs, which is very difficult.
It seems like a horrible way to die, and I think that probably could be part of the panic as well. It just seems like a horribly painful and horrible way to die. I mean, it's not
thinking into it. I guarantee you is no fun. But once you're on a ventilator, we put you unconscious. We make it tolerable. We'd have medicines that give people so it's not such a horrible experience, and it helps with the lung compliance if people aren't upset. They aren't tense.
One last medical question, and then I want to ask a final question about how can people prevent this and what should they do. And we're not going to talk much longer after that because I know you've got a lot to do right now. But the one last question I have about this spread of this disease, because one of the things that people are saying is, well, the numbers aren't right because there's asymptomatic people going around who are infecting people. And I know they say there's 18,000 people who have it in America right now, but really it could be 10 times that. And we don't know because we didn't test quickly enough in the United States. And we're going to, in 1 week from now, it's going to blow up. And there's going to be there's videos going around online that have people with graphs, and they're looking at math, and they're saying exponential growth. And next week it's going to be 40,000. The week after that, 80,000. And in 3 weeks, we're going to have 1 million people with the virus. Is that wrong?
I think, and I've shared my thoughts with Dr. Oz and other doctors, and we all kind of agree if we're anything under 60,000 by the end of the week, this week, which would be, the 27th, 28th, that's pretty damn good. That is not where we thought we would be.
Even if it's doubling every 3 days, wouldn't that mean that we'd be quickly at 1 million within 2 weeks?
Doubling is not exponential, right? Necessarily, and so it's the rate of change. If it's increasingly accelerating, that's when we're in trouble. If you see each day. Now, we should have doubled at least.
Well, if you have 20, I don't know if I'm using the word exponential right, but if you have 20,000 people with it today, and 40,000 with it tomorrow, and 80,000 the next day, and then 160,000 the next day, then 300. Now you're getting up into 300. Now you're up to 1 million in a week and a half, right? So that's just by doubling, because every time it doubles, the number is bigger. Doubles again. I'm not good at math, but. That seems like you can get to the whole country being infected. And when you hear, them saying, 90% of the country is going to get infected, you're like, how is that possible? Well, is that because of exponential growth? Is that happening in the background right now, in undiagnosed cases? And is that going to happen? Is 80% of the country going to be infected by this? That's what I keep hearing.
If it is, which I don't believe that's true, but let's just say it is. It's going to be slow so that we don't overwhelm the healthcare system, which is really what this is all about.
That's why people have to go in their homes, so people aren't infecting as many people, because they're not out at Fort Lauderdale on the beach doing their spring break.
Right. So it's not happening as quickly. But in the meantime, there are some good treatments coming on board. Mm-hmm. And once we have good treatments, that's going to change the whole course of this thing. Because then it can be rendered back towards influenza, right? Even though we don't have a vaccine. And the whole thing about the asymptomatic carrier is really what has caused a lot of anxiety now. People look at each other as, even though they're walking around feeling great, oh my God, you could be one of those people. I've noticed since Thursday, a deep paranoia about one another. And that's fine. That's good. That's keeping us apart and socially isolated stuff. My fear is, I don't want to be one of those people who I feel terrible. If I were able to, how horrible would you? Oh my God! Yeah. To be an asymptomatic carrier and be walking around, you wouldn't want to expose your family. You wouldn't want to expose anybody. So that's a horrible thing. I have a factor of 10 of asymptomatic carriers is again worst case scenario. It may be more like a factor of 2 or 3. And so let's go back to the numbers. So we should have doubled. We should have doubled just by virtue of the backlog of testing. So we had all these tens of thousands of testing that had to come in. They came in all on the same day. That's not reflecting the attack rate of the virus. In addition to that doubling, there should have been another bump that we're just not seeing if this thing were really starting to accelerate. So it's kind of been pretty steady, and all the bumps we're seeing right now are from the increasing in testing and the sudden backlog coming in. So this was all predicted. We knew there would be a sudden bump right now. The real question is next week. When do you put this podcast up?
Anytime. Could go up as soon as today or tomorrow.
Okay. So Monday and Friday of next week are really those are the key. That's how we're going to figure out where we are on the curve and how we're doing with the social isolation. And all these doomsday scenarios can be pushed aside if we are flattening the curve effectively. And then if we come up with effective treatments and drop the risk of the illness, particularly in people under 65, down to the level of the flu, we're in pretty damn good shape at that point. We are in really good shape. And people should think in terms of that kind of positive looking forward, as opposed to let the professionals whose job it is to prepare for the worst case scenario and to keep us safe, they need to be thinking that way. We don't.
I am very hopeful that is the case, and I'm praying for that because, there are a lot of this panic is being generated online, obviously, most of it, all of it, I'm sure. And in 2 weeks from now, there's all these graphs going around. There's going to be 4 million people with it in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks from now, if there's, like you said, 60,000 people infected.
If 2 weeks we're at 250,000, that's okay. That's not
Okay.
great,
Okay.
but that's not the scenario those graphs we're painting, is it?
It's not 10 million. Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
we could be even better than that. Now, there will be local problems. This is the thing, again. Locally, there will be surges in concentrated areas like New York City and whatnot, and these are serious challenges. And I have deep faith in my peers and the medical system in here in the U.S. Something I've begun saying lately is, when you see the analysis of where the U.S. healthcare system ranks relative to other countries, this kind of thing is never taken into consideration. My peers and the hospitals and the systems, we know how to flex, we know how to get it done, and we know how to innovate better than anybody in the world. And you're going to see wonderful evidence of that as we move forward.
That's good, and that's hopeful. And actually, I'm going to answer your question differently when you ask me when does this post. I think it'll be productive to get this up as soon as possible. So
yeah.
It'll actually be up about 2 minutes after we finish talking.
Okay.
I want people to get this information, and it really will be 2 minutes. I'm just gonna post it. I'm just gonna hit post.
That's
and I'm
the
gonna
Webovision.
That's the
magic
Webovision
of podcasting.
Yeah, it'll be up about 2 minutes after we finish talking.
And again, what I find curious is people who get angry when you try to show them the potential. It doesn't have to be bad, right? You can. Yes, we need to look at the bad outcomes, and I cannot promise it's going to be a better outcome. But if I were betting, I would bet we're going to be in decent shape in a few weeks. And frankly, the harder putt, the harder call, is going to be once it looks like we're really in good shape. How do you turn back the economy on? How do you get us back to work? How do we do that? That is a tough putt. That's going to depend on how flat the curve is, how much information we have, and how good the treatments are that we think are looking pretty good. And so we'll know that in a couple of weeks too. And then people will start talking about, well, who goes back to work and when and how do we not prevent another spike, which could this is, again, to prepare everybody, could easily happen. We could easily be called back indoors for a little while, sort of another fire drill, but we would be more prepared and able to understand it's a short-term thing, have very specific goals, and it won't seem as bad if we have to do it again. Though, like with any other trauma, when you get hit again, it's pretty rough always.
I mean, you hear right now in Italy that there's soldiers on the streets, that the continued lockdown is happening, that 600 people are dying in a day, and they're sort of at this further ahead long stage than us. I mean, why are the soldiers still on the street there? Why is everyone still in lockdown there? It seems like they've been in lockdown for a while.
It's still expanding. It's still expanding there, and they did not react until they had already exceeded their healthcare system's ability to respond.
Mm-hmm.
So they were when they began taking actions, and by the way, the physicians there did a incredible job of flexing up and being innovative, and lots of good things they did, and they met the demands for the most part, but they were exceeded. They exceeded that system's ability. Then they started taking aggressive action. And so that's the story we don't want to get into here. It's literally because of Italy that I don't believe we're going to see anything like that here. We learned. We're doing something different.
That's hopeful. Okay, my last question, because I know you must be very, very busy, but just for some helpful tips for people out there who don't want to get sick, or what should people be doing right now to prevent getting themselves from getting sick, and what type of action should people be taking right now?
So you should familiarize yourself with your state and your county's recommendations. You should follow them to the letter because you want to be a good citizen and you want to follow the leaders' recommendations. They are counting on you, and we're counting on each other. You should be very familiar with the CDC recommendations because that should be your gold standard. If you have to go out and work, it is social distancing, 6 feet, and also bring your Clorox wipes. Don't touch things you don't have to touch. Don't let your hands go to your face. There's some evidence that moisture in the nose and moisture in the throat might have some benefit. This virus does not like that. And some occasional information coming in about zinc maybe being of some use, though I can't make that recommendation specifically. And it is about isolating. That's what we're doing. That's our main intervention right now. But keep your eye on the positive news because there's stuff flying around that I'm hearing clinically that is very encouraging.
I heard ibuprofen is bad, and that it
Yes. There's some evidence of that. I don't know what that's all about necessarily. Tylenol should be okay, but all the anti-inflammatories, it's a good idea to avoid that right now until you hear otherwise. And again, I don't know that to be true, but I have heard that repeatedly, and by the same, and not from credible sources, by the way. But I don't know what that's all about. But you can just take Tylenol. Why not? And I have concerns about nonsteroidals anyway, in terms of the effect on stomach and kidney, and we don't need people having complications that send them to the hospital for anything else. So I'm sort of in favor of Tylenol. So Tylenol too, watch the dosing. It can be toxic to your liver. If you're a heavy drinker, Tylenol is not good for you. And then there, of course, is that whole story about the ACE inhibitors and the ARBs, the blood pressure medicine. Please let that shake out. Do not change your medication. Follow your doctor unless your doctor tells you otherwise.
Okay. Dr. Drew, thank you so much. What does the rest of your day look like? Are you on the air? Are you talking to people all over the country?
I'm going to stream like you and I did yesterday and try to have this conversation directly with people live at drdrew.com. And then Corolla's coming in tomorrow and do another stream with me about 3 o'clock Pacific. This is Sunday now, the whatever date that is. And I'll tell you the date is the...
Say hi to Adam for me. He's been killing it down at the Comedy Store. It's great seeing him up there on stage, just destroying the place. It's awesome.
Good. 22nd is the day we'll be doing it. And then we'll start the week over again. I do a nightly show on Fox 11 where I help interpret the news and do exactly what you and I are doing right now. And I really appreciate the opportunity. And we're gonna. I just want to. I feel like I want to hold a torch up and move forward and tell everybody we're going to be okay, but it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy.
I can tell you, I definitely feel better after talking to you than I did before about this situation.
That's my goal. Good.
Yeah, so I really would like to be able to get out of the house sometime this year. So
beautiful. Let's do it. Do it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Drew. I appreciate it.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.
That was Dr. Drew Pinsky with some important and hopeful information. Thank you, Dr. Drew, for calling into the show. If you would like to follow Dr. Drew on social media, he's everywhere that social media is. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course he has 5 shows. So check him out there for more detailed analysis of what's going on right now with the coronavirus pandemic. Everybody, I appreciate you tuning in. It's helpful for me to know that you're listening. I am on quarantine here in my home in Los Angeles, and let's get through this together. Be safe.